House will be in order. Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 29, 2024. I hereby appoint the Honorable Cliff Bentz to act as Speaker Pro Tempore on this day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 9, 2024, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders, and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this week, the House Committee on Homeland Security is marking up articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his stark dereliction of duty at our nation's southern border. I believe that Secretary Mayorkas deserves to be impeached for his failures, and my intention is to vote in favor of his impeachment. That said, it is because of House Republicans' commitment to restoring regular order that we have now reached this critical juncture. Regular order has allowed the Homeland Security Committee to conclude its investigation into Secretary Mayorkas and move at an expedited pace in its consideration of these impeachment articles. It is well known that I voted to refer the impeachment process to this committee. Regular order can and should be followed, especially on such an important issue as this. What has come to light now is that the vote to refer these articles to the Homeland Security Committee expedited the process by giving that committee sole jurisdiction over the articles. That vote gave us the quickest possible timeline to move these impeachment articles to the Senate, where a conviction can and should be affirmed. We must also acknowledge that regular order has also preserved precious taxpayer dollars that would have otherwise been wasted if the committee's investigation had been immediately cut short. Mr. Speaker, while we're on the topic of the southern border, let me address the Senate's secret border deal. The President has claimed that he needs Congress to pass legislation to empower him to secure the southern border. That is patently false. Congress has no such obligation to do so. President Biden has always had the authority to enact measures at the southern border to deter illegal aliens from entering our country, ending catch and release, ceasing exploitation of parole authority, reinstating the Remain in Mexico program, expanding the use of expedited removal authority, renewing construction of the border wall. Let's not forget about what authority is granted to the President under the Immigration and Nationality Act as well. Quote, whenever the President finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interest of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Again, the President already has the authority to secure the southern border. Even in precedent set by the Supreme Court in Trump versus Hawaii, the President can make, quote, decisions whether and when to suspend entry, whose entry to suspend, for how long, and on what conditions, end quote. Mr. Speaker, President Biden is acting as if Congress has tied his hands, and the only way he can secure the border is with more congressional approval. The truth is that President Biden has been sitting on his own hands for months on end. Perhaps he should take a long, hard look in the mirror. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to take a minute this morning to, again, look at the 118th Congress, which just completed its first year of operation last December. And it was, sadly, the least productive Congress in memory. 31 bills were enacted during that first year of the 118th Congress. Again, that is a fraction of the number of bills that have been introduced in this Congress that now surpasses 7,000 bills which were introduced in the House and a comparable number in the Senate. Obviously, a lot of the year was consumed with a lot of inter-party fighting with the majority party, but now with really a year left, it's our duty to try and find bipartisan measures that are actually going to help this country and address real problems for Americans. The good news is a week ago Friday, the Ways and Means Committee reported out H.R. 7024, which again is a bill aimed at making corrections and improvements to the tax code that, again, are long overdue. There are three basic pieces to it. Number one, it reinstated the child tax credit, which had been wiped out after ARPA expired. And again, this will basically take roughly 500,000 children out of poverty. Again, low-income families don't qualify for the full value of the child tax credit. And again, thankfully, the two sides came together to come up with a meaningful fix. Again, we really have more work to do because the initial version that was part of ARPA actually cut child poverty in this country in half. The second thing it did is it expanded the low-income housing tax credit. We have a desperate need for more housing supply in this country. And again, this will stimulate more investment by developers to build more housing. And I want to be clear, those units that will benefit from this will be mixed income and will benefit, again, working families and folks who are desperate to find affordable places to live. But what I really want to talk about is the research and development tax deduction, which in 2017, when the tax law was passed, which I opposed at the time, it basically took the research and development expensing mechanism that had been on the books since 1954, which allowed businesses to write down the investments that they did in new products, processes, workforce innovation, and basically forced them to have to spread it out over 5 years, causing a huge hardship for small businesses, particularly small manufacturers. I have a poster next to me from the Westminster Tool Company in Plainfield, Connecticut. I visited a few days ago. This is a firm with 35 workers. Again, family-owned business. They do great work in terms of medical device manufacturing. They also make aerospace parts that go into our F-35 program that, again, is so critical to the Air Force and the Navy. And when this new expensing mechanism went into effect, and it's almost hard to believe this, but their tax bill went up 355%. Again, for companies like this who don't have cash reserves to continue innovating in terms of new products and processes, which, again, Westminster Tool does, this is just basically a wipeout in terms of their ability to invest. And this is showing up across the country. It was a terrible decision back in 2017. This bill will, again, resume having the annual expensing mechanism, which will allow this company, and again, it's a picture with Ray Coombs, who's to my immediate right there, the owner, and his two daughters and his son, Colby, who, again, are running the business. And behind him is the president of the Eastern Manufacturing Alliance, which, again, has been desperately asking Congress to go back and fix this ridiculous change which took place in the 2017 tax bill. So again, this is a pro-growth measure, which is going to allow companies like this to get back on track in terms of innovation, which is so important for us to keeping ahead of our global competitors. And again, creating jobs, good jobs, skilled jobs that, again, Westminster Tool has been just an absolute shining example of why we need to make this change. So hopefully we are going to get this across the finish line and make sure that, again, a problem is fixed. We could do more There's no question about it. But the fact of the matter is, in this Congress, we got to take W's where we can and victories where we can to address real problems for companies like Westminster Tool. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lalota, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Congress writes the laws and the executive branch enforces them. Let me say that again, Mr. Speaker. Congress writes the laws and the executive branch enforces them. At least that's what we teach our kids, and that's been the norm throughout our nation's history. Yet President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas have refused to enforce our nation's border security laws. Now, as House Republicans are poised to impeach Secretary Mayorkas for his willful and systematic refusal to enforce our nation's border security laws, President Biden feigns that Congress must pass even more border security laws before he can act. It's a sad attempt to shift blame, Mr. Speaker. If the president truly wanted to secure our border, by a stroke of a pen, he could reinstate Remain in Mexico. President Biden could cancel the mass parole of unvetted migrants into the United States. He could cease repositioning border agents away from the border, and he could resume border wall construction. But, Mr. Speaker, we know the president's not going to do that. The president should do that, and he should start today by enforcing our border security laws. But sadly, he won't, and he should not be able to shift blame to anybody else. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Gracious and merciful God, receive our prayers and our purpose for this day. We begin with the best of intentions, renewed by the rest of the weekend, asking your blessing as we tackle the challenges laid before us in the week ahead. Hear our prayer that we remain committed to doing the right thing, and bless our desire to bring careful thought to do what is pleasing to you. taking pains to remain true to honest things, true not only in your eyes, but in the eyes of the people we serve. In this, may we prove faithful to loving you with our whole heart, with our soul, with all our strength, and with our whole mind. And may the work of our hands and the intentions of our truest self serve as worthy proof that our love for our neighbor is no less than that for our own selves. Lead us, O Lord, in the living of this day. We pray in your most holy name. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, are invited to participate.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Americans are saddened by the deaths and injuries of U.S. service members yesterday in the Middle East. My thoughts and prayers are with the families. Americans are sitting ducks for primary attacks that are occurring abroad and at home because of policies of appeasement. A key priority is to provide the necessary tools and support for our military who so bravely protect American families. The Biden appeasement toward Iran and its terrorist puppets have resulted in an inexcusable failure. We have the circumstance that I particularly appreciate. I'm the father of 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, and Afghanistan, and my recognition of this tragedy is enhanced. Biden and Harris should resign to reverse the policies of appeasement which have exposed all military American worldwide to attacks. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America with Biden open borders for terrorists. It is sadly clear there will be more 9/11 attacks across America imminent in our country, as warned by the FBI. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This month of January has been National Poverty in America Awareness Month. The grim reality is that over 40 million Americans, including nearly 20% of individuals in my home of the Virgin Islands, and that's 30% of children there, live in poverty. This issue is not an inevitability, but a crisis that we have the power to resolve. Poverty manifests not only through hunger, but also limited education, social discrimination, desperation which leads to crime, and diminished democratic participation. Tragically, communities of color and people living in territories face even greater disadvantage. It's disheartening to see a lack of concerted effort in poverty alleviation in this House. Many of my Republican colleagues are fixated on political stunts and threatening critical funding cuts, having diverted attention from this pressing issue. We must prioritize bipartisan collaboration, whether it's the border or hunger in our own land, over political posturing. We must unite in our commitment to eradicate poverty, uplift every citizen, and guarantee prosperous future for people across our land. I yield back.
The chairlady lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives serve. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on January 25, 2024 at 3:52 p.m. that the Senate agreed to Senate Concurrent Resolution 26, that the Senate passed Senate 2853, Senate 3646, appointments, Health Information Technology Advisory Committee, Board of Trustees of the John C. Stennis Center for Public Service Training and Development, and Washington's farewell address. Signed sincerely, Kevin F. McCumber, Acting Clerk.
The Chair Lady lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives serve. This is to notify you formally, pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, that the office of the Sergeant at Arms for the House of Representatives has been served with a grand jury subpoena for documents issued by the U.S. Department of Justice. After consulting with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that compliance with the subpoena is consistent with the rights and privileges of the House. Signed sincerely, William P. McFarland, Sergeant at Arms of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.
The House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5528 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5528, a bill to evaluate the impact of the lowest price, technically acceptable source selection process on national security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 5528, the Safe and Smart Federal Purchasing Act. Lowest price, technically acceptable, is a source selection method outlined in the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Simply put, this Federal Acquisition Regulation prioritizes price above all else. Prioritizing price over any other technical or operational factors in federal procurement can result in agencies cutting corners, sacrificing long-term value, and potentially jeopardizing national security. The House Oversight Committee and previous Congresses placed appropriate constraints on agency use of the LPTA source selection process to mitigate such concerns. Those constraints recognized that the LPTA standard is not always appropriate when agencies seek to purchase technically innovative services or technology. Therefore, my bill requires the Director of the Office of Management and Budget to conduct a government-wide evaluation of the LPTA source selection process to determine if it is being used in a way that creates any national security risks. This is a useful step forward, understanding how agencies are using LPTA in their source selection decisions, and will determine whether agencies are relying on LPTA when it is not appropriate. This review is a common sense step to ensuring America's national security while also reducing supply chain risks to federal agencies. I thank my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Jerry Connolly, and my colleague from Colorado, Ms. Lauren Boebert, for their support in drafting this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this simple and necessary bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The gentleman's legislation, H.R. 5528, the Safe and Smart Federal Purchasing Act would require the director of OMB to review the procurement management practices of federal agencies to determine whether the use of acquisition procedures focused exclusively on cost, known as lowest price technically acceptable, or LPTA, poses any national security risks. Since our committee reported this bill last September, I appreciate that Mr. Donalds and the majority sought and incorporated feedback from the administration and also earned bipartisan support with the co-sponsorship of Mr. Conley, a longtime expert in federal operations. With these updates, I'm happy to lend my full support to this legislation. When federal agencies purchase goods or services, they strive to achieve the best value for the American people. In the words of the Federal Acquisition Regulation, best value means that the acquisition should provide, quote, the greatest overall benefit in response to the requirement. Under LPTA procedures, price is the controlling factor in awarding a contract with no consideration given to any other factors. This contrasts with the more frequently used trade-off approach, which looks at the bigger picture and considers additional factors beyond just cost, perhaps assessing elements like quality and performance or a bidder's technical or managerial expertise. This bill and the trade-off approach to federal contracting take into consideration that focusing on contract price alone can actually increase the overall cost to the federal government and the people. For example, cutting costs in the short term can lead to expensive project delays or might result in taxpayer dollars flowing to adversarial nations that threaten our national security. If no consideration is given to the strength and integrity of a bidder's supply chain, cutting costs in the short term could lead to inferior products or disastrous supply shortages at key moments. So I am happy to give my support to this legislation. I thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida is now recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers on this bill, and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
No further speakers. And I reserve the balance of my time. I'm ready to close.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I'll yield the balance of my time if the gentleman's ready to close.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Safe and Smart Federal Purchasing Act is measured and targeted legislation that can inform future congressional work on federal procurement, a policy area where we know is ripe for reform and taxpayer savings. I encourage my colleagues in the House to support this common sense bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 5528 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and with
Madam Speaker,
on the
Madam
table.
Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Purpose, does the gentleman from Florida?
I actually request the yeas and nays on the measure.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass S 3427 as amended.
The clerk will read. The clerk will report the title of the bill. Does the gentleman from Florida intend to call it up as without an amendment?
Yes, is without an amendment, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 3427, an act to extend the authority to provide employees of the United States Secret Service with overtime pay beyond other statutory limitations and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of S. 3427, the Overtime Pay for Protective Services Act of 2023. As we all know, the members of the Secret Service are tasked with protecting presidents, other high-ranking government officials, and their families from harm. They staff public events, providing a visible police presence, securing vital property in our nation's capital and nationwide. They are trained and prepared to act at the first sign of danger. And while this career can be extremely rewarding, the job itself is challenging and stressful, with agents and officers often working long hours around the clock, including on holidays and weekends. Through these sacrifices, Secret Service agents and officers commit their lives to public service and deserve to be fairly compensated for their work, which is why in 2016, Congress authorized allowing Secret Service officers and agents to earn overtime pay above their GS pay scale level. Unfortunately, on December 31st of last year, the Secret Service's authority to pay special agents and uniformed division officers adequate overtime expired, compromising the ability to pay many commensurate with their duties. With the upcoming elections and other high-profile events of global significance this year and beyond, the Secret Service will be called upon to help protect events and people serving in positions vital to national security. And that is why I'm pleased that the Overtime Pay for Protective Services Act, which would renew the authority needed to provide Secret Service members with the respect, gratitude, and compensation that they deserve, is before us today. This bill has been endorsed by the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. I want to thank my House colleagues, Homeland Security Committee Chairman Green, Ranking Member Benny Thompson, for leading the bipartisan companion in the House. I also thank House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer and Ranking Member Jamie Raskin for their work addressing this important U.S. Secret Service workforce issue. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume, and I rise to support S. 3427, the Overtime Pay for Protective Services Act. The legislation would see to it that Secret Service agents who work overtime get paid for the time they've worked. The bill authorizes an extension of the Secret Service's current pay cap level of level 2 of the executive schedule through 2028, so that agents are permitted to receive compensation for the hours that they indeed work overtime. Without this legislation, the pay of Secret Service agents would be capped at GS 15 level. The presidential campaign years place great challenges and strain on Secret Service personnel. According to the most recent data available in 2022, nearly 1,600 agents worked so many hours that they maxed out their annual overtime and salary. The amount of overtime worked resulted on average in more than $11,000 per agent. This bill also includes extensive reporting requirements, including both quarterly and annual reporting on the number of individuals receiving overtime and estimates for future years. This will help keep the agency focused on its personnel management problem and keep Congress informed on the issue and funding needs of the agency. This elevated pay cap for Secret Service agents has been in place since 2016. While the agency's made some progress in recruiting, this is in essence a management problem. The Secret Service must be able to pay its people in order to attract and retain the best talent that's available. The Secret Service needs to hire more people to reduce its heavy overtime expenses. I reserve the balance.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is now recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I have no further speakers and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I encourage my House colleagues on both sides of the aisle to unite behind the brave men and women of the Secret Service and support this common sense bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 3427? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
I request the yeas and nays, Madam Speaker.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2754.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2754, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 2395 East Del Mar Boulevard in Laredo, Texas, as the Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza, Lance Corporal Juan Rodrigo Rodriguez, and Sergeant Roberto Arzola, Jr., Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, which would name the post office in Laredo, Texas, after Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza, Lance Corporal Juan Rodrigo Rodriguez, and Sergeant Roberto Arzola, Jr. Sorry, Madam Speaker. Lance Corporal Espinoza joined the Marine Corps after graduating high school in 2019. He was one of the 13 service members killed in a suicide bombing during the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. He was just 20 years old. Lance Corporal Rodriguez served in the Marine Force Reserves after graduating from high school in the year 2000. In 2005, at the age of 23, he died conducting combat operations in Anbar Province, Iraq. Sergeant Roberto Arzola, Jr. served in the U.S. Army and was deployed to Iraq in May of 2004. In June of that year, one day before he was set to return home, he was killed in an explosion in Baghdad. Sergeant Arzola also served as a border patrol agent in Laredo, Texas, before being deployed to Iraq. Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza, Lance Corporal Juan Rodrigo Rodriguez, and Sergeant Roberto Arzola, Jr. all died while serving our great nation. I support this legislation that names a post office in the memory of these American heroes, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume. I rise today in support of H.R. 2754, introduced by my distinguished colleague from Texas, Representative Cuellar, which would designate the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 2395 East Del Mar Boulevard in Laredo, Texas, as the Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza, Lance Corporal Juan Rodrigo Rodriguez, and Sergeant Roberto Arzola, Jr. Post Office Building. These 3 brave individuals made the ultimate sacrifice by giving their lives for our country. I now yield such time as he may consume to the gentleman from Texas, Representative Cuellar.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my good friend from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for yielding. I want to thank the gentleman from Florida also, and both of y'all for speaking about these 3 heroes from Laredo. Members, this bill will honor the lives of Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza, Lance Corporal Juan Rodrigo Rodriguez, and Sergeant Roberto Arzola, who gave their lives for our nation. This bill will rename the Del Mar Post Office in Laredo, Texas, which will honor these heroes' sacrifices. Although words and actions cannot replace these brave individuals, dedicating this post office honors their legacies. Lance Corporal David Lee Espinoza was born on July 10, 2001 in Laredo, Texas, but lived in nearby Rio Bravo, Texas all his life. He graduated from LBJ Johnson School in 2019, and shortly after graduating, he joined the United States Marine Corps. On August 26, 2021, during the withdrawal from Afghanistan, Lance Corporal Espinosa was one of the 13 service members killed in Kabul, Afghanistan. He was only 20 years old. Lance Corporal Juan Rodriguez lived in El Cenizo, a town near Laredo, where he attended United South High School, and he was involved with the junior ROTC. He led his group to a junior ROTC national championship in 1998, and after graduating from high school in 2000, he joined the United States Marine Forces Reserves. He was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 23rd Marine Regiment, 4th Division, Corpus Christi, Texas. And on January 13, 2005, Lance Corporal Rodriguez died in action while conducting combat operations in the Anbar province in Iraq. He was only 23 years of age. Sergeant Roberto Arizola, he was born December 11, 1973 in Laredo, Texas. He graduated from high school in 1992, enlisted in the United States Army in 1996. He was assigned to the 297 Military Intelligence Battalion, 513 Military Intelligence Brigade, Fort Gordon, Georgia. Sergeant Arizola had been a border patrol taking care of our borders in Laredo, Texas, before he was deployed to Iraq in May 2004. And on June 8, 2005, a day before he was scheduled to return from Iraq, Sergeant Arizola was killed in an explosion near his vehicle in Baghdad, Iraq. He was only 31 years of age. Through this dedication, we ensure that the heroic legacy remain engraved in the hearts of our community, a lasting tribute to the selflessness, service, and courage. Thank you not only to these brave soldiers, but to all the veterans who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. We would not be here without you. And with that, I say thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
And from Texas Reserves, and the gentleman yields back. And the gentleman from Maryland Reserves. And the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I am prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I've got no further speakers. I just want to say that Lance Corporal Espinosa, Lance Corporal Rodriguez, and Sergeant Arizola admirably served our country, and we thank them and their families for their extraordinary service. I urge passage of H.R. 2754, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2754? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Madam Speaker.
Purpose, does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present, and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3865.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3865, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 101 South 8th Street and Lebanon, Pennsylvania as the Lieutenant William D. Lebo Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3865, which names a Lebanon, Pennsylvania post office for Lieutenant William Lebo. Lieutenant Lebo was born in Vicenza, Italy, to American parents. At the end of his father's service in the U.S. Army, the Lebo family moved to Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. Lieutenant Lebo lived in Lebanon County for the rest of his life and grew up to join the Lebanon City Police Department, where he served for 40 years. In March of 2022, 30 days before he was set to retire, Lieutenant Lebo was shot and killed in the line of duty. Lieutenant Lebo died protecting the community he grew up in, and I support this bill that honors his legacy in Lebanon County. And with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume. I rise in support of H.R. 3865 to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 101 South 8th Street in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, as the Lieutenant William D. Lebo Post Office building. I join my colleague, Mr. Donalds, in praising the work of Lieutenant Lebo. He had a remarkable 40-year career with the Lebanon City Police Department, but in March 2022, just 1 month before he was set to retire, Lieutenant Lebo was killed while on duty. I encourage my colleagues to join us in honoring the life of Lieutenant Lebo by naming a post office in Lebanon, Pennsylvania after him, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser.
The gentleman is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my good friend, the gentleman from Florida, for yielding on this important issue. I also want to thank our colleague from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for your support. It is truly my honor today, Madam Speaker, to rise in support of this bill. It's a community bill, H.R. 3865, which would rename the post office at 101 South 8th Street in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, as the Lieutenant William D. Lebo Post Office Building. Madam Speaker, Lieutenant Lebo of the Lebanon City Police Department tragically lost his life in the line of duty on March 31st, 2022, while responding to a domestic-related burglary incident. During his memorial, my very good friend, Lebanon County District Attorney Pierre Hess Graff, said that Lieutenant Lebo's last words to his men before entering the house that fateful day were, "I'm going to go in first, and I'm going to keep you safe." This is the kind of police officer Lieutenant Lebo was, a man who was willing to give his life to protect his fellow officers. He served the Lebanon Police Department and his community faithfully for 40 years and was just 30 days from retirement at the time of his passing. Madam Speaker, as the son of a police officer, the risk of our finest to protect and serve needs never be forgotten and always respected and certainly not taken for granted. Lieutenant Lebo's fellow officers say there is not a day that goes by without members of the department sharing fond stories of Lieutenant Lebo. I'm told a story often shared is that Lieutenant Lebo would drive around his patrol car with the windows down to better interact with the community he served, but also to more easily hear if someone needed help. He was an incredibly community-oriented police officer who really served as a model for law enforcement. Lieutenant Lebo is survived by his loving wife, Laura, his daughter, Corinne, and his mother, Rena. I'm honored to have them joining us here today in the House chamber, along with the mayor of Lebanon City, Sherry Capello, and Lebanon City Police Chief Brett Fisher. We're honored to have you with us. Lieutenant Lebo was known as a mentor to younger officers, whom he loved training to be the best police officers that they could be. And as Chief Fisher has said, somebody that has spent 40 years at the police department, as Lieutenant Lebo did, they're still with you in so many ways. There isn't much, he said, you can touch or do that Lieutenant Lebo didn't have his hand in somewhere along his career on the Lebanon County, the Lebanon City Police Force. To honor her husband's remarkable life, Laura Lebo established Lieutenant William D. Lebo Memorial Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting the growth of Lebanon with positive intent providing educational scholarship to Lebanon County first responders and their children, and providing comprehensive leadership development training to the law enforcement community. While Laura and the community have already done such great work keeping Lieutenant Lebo's memory alive, it is my hope that the renaming of this post office in his honor will further serve as a lasting recognition of his life, his legacy, during which he always put service above self. I do know that memorializing Lieutenant Lebo in this manner will be so meaningful to the Lebanon community. While I attended Lieutenant Lebo's funeral, it was overwhelmingly clear just how much he meant to Lebanon and, in fact, all of Pennsylvania. The procession, Madam Speaker, was miles long, and people lined the streets to pay their final respects. Lieutenant Lebo was a dedicated public servant who was remembered by his colleagues and those he served as calm, an ethical police officer who was completely devoted to protecting the Lebanon community. So I do appreciate and ask my colleagues to join me today in supporting H.R. 3865 to rename the post office in Lebanon, Pennsylvania for a very deserving local hero, Lieutenant William D. Lebo. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida reserves.
Reserves.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
No further speakers, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields, and the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3865? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3947.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3947, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 859 North State Road 21 in Melrose, Florida, as the Pamela Jane Rock Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I move to yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of this bill, which names a Melrose, Florida post office for Pamela Jane Rock. Pamela Jane, a native Floridian, attended the University of Florida, where she studied nutrition and dietetics and was a proud member of the Gator Marching Band. Pam remained a Florida Gator fan for the rest of her life and loved going to Florida football games with her family. In January of 2022, Pam became a letter carrier for the United States Postal Service in Gainesville, Florida. In August of 2022, Pam was attacked by dogs while delivering mail. She later died because of injuries she sustained in the attack. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill honoring a dedicated postal employee whose life was tragically cut short while serving our nation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I yield myself such time as I might consume. I rise in support of H.R. 3947, a bill designating the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 859 North State Road 21 in Melrose, Florida, as the Pamela Jane Rock Post Office Building. After graduating from the University of Florida, Pam started a long career with the WIC program in dietary education. She worked with women and families from across the United States, from Florida, Yellowstone, North Carolina, to Georgia, and even with the Peace Corps in Guatemala to advance critical nutritional goals for infants and children. Following her long-term service with the WIC program, she transitioned into a new role of public service with the U.S. Postal Service in January 2022 as a letter carrier. On August 22, 2022, she was unexpectedly and severely injured while delivering the mail and sadly passed away in Florida as a consequence of her injuries. I encourage my colleagues to join me in honoring the life and the hard work of Ms. Rock by naming a post office in Melrose after her, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves, and the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bean.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Leader Donalds. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 3947, to designate the post office in Melrose, Florida, in memory of my constituent, Pamela Jane Rock. I'd like to thank my co-lead introducer of the bill, Representative Kamak, as well as the entire Florida delegation for their support in co-sponsoring this bill. Pamela Jane Rock was born on August 6, 1961, to John and Jane Rock of Plantation, Florida. She was the 14th and youngest child of an amazing family. Growing up, she attended St. Gregory's Catholic School in Plantation and St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. After high school, she attended the University of Florida and graduated in 1984 with a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics. During her time at UF, she was a proud member of the University of Florida Fightin' Gator Marching Band for 4 years. She was one of a kind in all that she did. After college, she worked for the state of Florida, the WIC program in Alachua County. Her passion for service continued when she spent 3 years with the Peace Corps in Guatemala, educating women on proper nutrition for families. Upon her return to the U.S., she ventured out west to Yellowstone and spent time on an Indian reservation, also educating women on infants' nutritional needs. Pam then returned to Gainesville, Florida in January 2022, where she joined the U.S. Postal Service and pursued a career as a letter carrier. With a desire to give back, she is remembered for placing an apple along with the mail for the residents along her route. This is the smile you saw. If she was delivering mail on your route, you saw this. Turn this and let everybody see it as well. This is the smile of Pam, and she literally lit up her route with that smile. She was a devoted Gator fan, and like many of her siblings, going to a Gator football game was a big deal, and she did it whenever she could. She gardened and loved having relationships with new people, especially in her church group. She loved animals, and it comes to no surprise she was a volunteer at St. Francis Pet Care in Gainesville. Tragically, Madam Speaker, Pam was attacked by dogs during her mail route in Interlochen, Florida, and succumbed to her injuries on August 22, 2022. It's still a sad day. Pamela's friends and family described her as the sweetest, supportive, always there to cheer you up, someone with a true servant's heart. She is survived by 11 of her siblings and countless nieces and nephews whom she adored. Several are in the gallery today for this big occasion as we take a step, hopefully, Madam Speaker, to honor her service. I thank them for being here today, and I can think of no better way to honor Pam's service to the United States Postal Service than by designating the Melrose, Florida Post Office as the Pamela Jane Rock Post Office. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida
reserves. And actually, Madam Chair, I'm prepared to close as well. I'm reserving. I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
No further speakers. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3947? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3728.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3728, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 25 Dorchester Avenue, Room 1 in Boston, Massachusetts as the Caroline Chang Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, which would name a Boston, Massachusetts post office for Caroline Chang. Caroline was born and raised in Boston's Chinatown and started her career serving as an interpreter for community members seeking medical care. In 1970, Caroline Chang was appointed by the mayor of Boston as the manager of Chinatown's Little City Hall, where she continued her work advocating for the community. She went on to achieve a law degree from Suffolk Law School and to work for the United States Department of Health and Human Services for more than 30 years. Caroline Chang also helped establish the South Cove Community Health Center, the Chinese Historical Society of New England, and the Asian American Civic Association. I encourage my colleagues to support this legislation honoring this dedicated civil servant, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume. I rise in strong support of H.R. 3728 to designate the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 25 Dorchester Avenue, Room 1 in Boston as the Caroline Chang Post Office. This legislation, introduced by my distinguished colleague, Representative Presley, recognizes the contributions of Caroline Chang, who was born and raised in Boston's Chinatown. I didn't know her, but I've learned from my colleague that she was a trailblazer, a passionate advocate for her community, and a very devoted public servant. I now yield such time as she may require to the gentlelady from Massachusetts, Representative Presley.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin and Chair Comer, for advancing this legislation. I also want to thank my Massachusetts colleagues and our delegation for the unanimous support of this effort. I rise today to recognize Caroline Chang, a community builder and trailblazer who was a tireless advocate for the Massachusetts 7th. Caroline remains one of the greatest public servants that Boston and our Commonwealth has ever seen. She dedicated her life to serving the local Chinatown community and effecting lasting and positive change. At a young age, Caroline lost her father and began serving as a translator for her mother, while also looking after her 2 younger brothers and sister. Her willingness to care for her family extended to all of Boston, Chinatown, where community members would often rely on Caroline's assistance when seeking medical care. At the time, culturally congruent care was not an option for most Asian Americans in Boston. So whenever a neighbor needed to visit the doctor, Caroline would be at their side as a translator, as an advocate, and as a friend. Her early sense of purpose and community manifested into a love of organizing and movement building that remained with her as she went on to fight in all levels of government against discrimination faced by Asian Americans. From managing Chinatown's Little City Hall to her history-making tenure, her home community had a seat at the table. The Massachusetts 7th, which I am proud to represent, a vibrant and diverse district, and I'm especially proud to represent this district as a member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. It is home to nearly 100,000 Asian American and Pacific Islanders. In a testament to her ability to bring people together, Caroline routinely gathered Chinese, Japanese, of Asian American unity. She bridged gaps within and across marginalized groups, working in solidarity to form several community-based organizations that continue to serve Chinatown and Greater Boston today. The Asian Community Development Corporation, the Asian American Civic Association, and the Greater Boston Chinese Golden Age Center, to name only a few. Inspired in part by her early work as a translator, Caroline also helped found the South Cove Community Health Center, the first community health center to provide culturally congruent care to Asian Americans in the city of Boston. Today, it is the largest
Asian primary care provider in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. My bill, H.R. 3728, would designate the post office at 25 Dorchester Avenue, which is walking distance from South Cove, as the Caroline Chang Post Office. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there are currently 617 postal facilities. Of those renamed, only one has been named for a woman and only 5 for people of color. To date, not one has been named for an AAPI individual. Dating back to my time on the Boston City Council, I've underscored the need for us to have institutional representation in our public spaces, because who we honor matters. At a time when the contributions of Black, Brown, AAPI, and other marginalized communities are facing increased threats and erasure, recognizing their contributions by securing their representation is a small but meaningful step forward. Caroline often said, quote, "There is always more work to do," end quote, and I wholeheartedly agree. But today, with this legislation, we recognize the work that she has done and honor her legacy, a legacy that will endure for generations to come. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I'd also like to take a moment to thank a dedicated member of my A-team, Bailey Connors, and my ledge staff who worked tirelessly to bring this to fruition today. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is now recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
Reserve. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
No further speakers, and I'm prepared to close as well. I encourage my colleagues to join me in honoring the life of Ms. Chang by naming the post office in Boston, Massachusetts after her, and we will all be proud to see it happen pursuant to the remarks of Ms. Presley, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3728? For those in favor, say aye. For those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection.
Object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present, and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 599 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 599, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 3500 West 6th Street, Suite 103 in Los Angeles, California as the Dosen On Chang Ho Post Office.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 599. In 2004, Congress unanimously voted to designate a post office in Los Angeles as the Dosen On Chang Ho Post Office. Ang Chang Ho and his wife immigrated to the United States as the first married couple from Korea, founding early Korean American community groups and becoming a pivotal leader in the Korean American community. In 2022, the lease on the post office named for An Chang Ho expired, and the Postal Service moved the post office to a new location. This bill updates the current law passed in 2004 by transferring the Dosan An Chang Ho name to the new post office building. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill honoring this historical figure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I might consume. I rise in strong support of H.R. 599 to designate the facility of the U.S. Postal Service located at 3500 West 6th Street, Suite 103 in Los Angeles as the Dosan An Chang Ho Post Office. This legislation, introduced by my colleague, the distinguished Representative Jimmy Gomez of California, would designate a post office after the Korean-American leader Dosan An Chang Ho. A Korean independence activist who immigrated to the United States, he became an early leader in the Korean-American immigrant community. He opposed the Japanese occupation of Korea and later served as a founding member of the Korean Provisional Government. I now yield to my friend, the distinguished gentleman from California, Representative Gomez, for any remarks he may have.
Thank you so much. First, let me thank the ranking member for yielding and thank both the chairman and the ranking member for their support in finding a path to get this bill to the floor.
The gentleman from California is now recognized.
Sorry. Once again, let me just thank the chairman and the ranking member for their support in finding a path to get this important bill to the floor. I'm honored to represent LA's Koreatown, home of the largest Korean American community in any congressional district in our country. This legislation not only honors one of the first Korean American immigrants in the United States and a key figure in the Korean independence movement, Dosan An Chang Ho, it celebrates every Korean American who makes our country what it is today. An Chang Ho, also known by his pen name Dosan, was a pivotal early leader in the Korean American community, immigrating to the United States with his wife as the first married couple from Korea to do so, founding early Korean American community groups and laying the groundwork for the last 121 years of Korean American contributions. Dosan was also a celebrated Korean independence activist who helped author the South Korean national anthem, advocated for social reform, served as a leader of the provisional government, and played a key role in the opposition of the Japanese occupation of Korea. He was the father of trailblazing Korean American actors Philip Son An, and Rolf An, and his daughter Susan An Cuddy was the first Asian American woman to join the U.S. Navy and an important leader in the post-World War II national security community. Dosan was a pioneer in American history, and his story deserves to be told. Preserving his name on the post office in the heart of Koreatown, where he rose to become one of the first leaders of the Korean American community and where he founded the first Korean organization in the continental United States, will ensure this important piece of history is shared with generations to come. The Korean American story is the American story, and we must ensure this community receives the recognition and support they deserve. I'm proud of this measure to name our post office after Dosan An Chang Ho is on the floor of the House today, and I look forward to the day when this designation or redesignation is officially signed into law by the President. Thank you, and I yield back to the ranking member.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized.
And I'm happy to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Yes, in closing, Madam Speaker, I just want to encourage all of our colleagues to join us in honoring the life of Mr. Ho by naming a post office in Los Angeles after him. I urge passage of H.R. 599 and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 599 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1060.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1060, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1663 East Date Place in San Bernardino, California, as the Dr. Margaret B. Hill Post Office Building.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1060, which names the post office in San Bernardino, California, for Dr. Margaret B. Hill. Dr. Hill attended California State University, San Bernardino, and spent much of her life as an educational leader in the San Bernardino community. She served as a principal of San Andreas High School for 16 years, and later as assistant superintendent of administrative services for the San Bernardino County School System. In 2011, she was elected to the San Bernardino City Unified Board of Education, a position she remained in for 10 years. I encourage my colleagues to support this legislation honoring a dedicated local civil servant, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I rise in support of H.R. 1060 to designate the facility of the U.S. Postal Service 1663 East Date Place in San Bernardino as the Dr. Margaret B. Hill Post Office Building. The legislation introduced by my friend and my colleague, Mr. Aguilar, would rename the Del Rosa Post Office to honor Dr. Hill, a beloved educator and longtime advocate for the people of San Bernardino. I now yield such time as he may consume, and he knows how to do it, to the distinguished gentleman from California, Representative Aguilar.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from California is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the ranking member and the majority for working with us on this bill. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 1060, which would rename the Del Rosa Post Office in San Bernardino after Dr. Margaret B. Hill. Dr. Hill was truly the heartbeat of San Bernardino. Her life was marked by an unparalleled commitment to both community in the classroom and beyond. Through her compassion, her dedication, and her generosity, she changed countless lives for the better. As an educator and advocate, she ushered in positive change and steered students in the right direction for a brighter future. She was called the North Star for the San Bernardino County community when it came to issues of poverty, homelessness, race, and foster youth. After decades in the classroom as a teacher, vice principal, and principal, she retired but still found time to serve as an educator before she became elevated to serve as an elected school board member. For Dr. Hill, there was simply no task that was beneath her when it came to helping students. Her tutelage has shaped our community in profound ways, leaving an enduring legacy that transcends time. I'm so proud to lead this bill to enshrine her legacy in San Bernardino. I hope it will remind all of us in the years to come that we must continue to carry forward that legacy. I was honored to know her and work with her, and this will ensure that future generations will recognize and appreciate the impact that Dr. Hill had on our community. Thank you. I urge adoption, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I have no further speakers, Madam Speaker, but I want to encourage all of our colleagues to join us in honoring the life of Dr. Hill by naming the post office in San Bernardino after her, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves, yields. The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1060? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative.
Madam Speaker,
Purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present, and I make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motions to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5528 and Senate 3427. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5528 as amended, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 5528, a bill to evaluate the impact of the lowest price technically acceptable source selection process on national security and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 397, the nays are 0, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion from the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds, to suspend the rules and pass Senate 3427, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
Senate 3427, an act to extend the authority to provide employees of the United States Secret Service with overtime pay beyond other statutory limitations and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 378.
Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 379, the nays are 20. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that I may hereafter be considered as the first sponsor of H.R. 1633, a bill originally introduced by Representative Bill Johnson of Ohio for the purposes of adding co-sponsors and requesting reprintings pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 12.
Without objection, so ordered.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Tennessee, Pennsylvania. Stop,
Coming.
gentlewoman.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The gentleman from Tennessee has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks. Can we have
The order in the House. The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor my dear friend, State Senator Art Swan, who has served in the Tennessee State Senate since 2017. Senator Swan is a seventh-generation Tennessean who was born and raised in Blount County, where he now represents. He graduated from Maryville High School, pronounced Murrayville if you're from there, and got his bachelor's degree at the University of Tennessee at Martin in 1975. Senator Swan was serving in the Tennessee General Assembly on the House side when State Senator Doug Overby, another good friend of mine, was appointed by President Donald Trump to be the U.S. Attorney for East Tennessee. The Blount County Commission appointed Art to fill the vacant seat appropriately, and he has been in the role ever since. He recently announced, though, that he won't run for re-election. Senator Swan is an outstanding public servant who has served the folks in Blount and Sevier counties very well. He has proudly stood for the conservative principles that make East Tennessee so wonderful and that make our country and the best in the world. And it's not in my notes, but I would be remiss without saying that the state of Tennessee has zero debt, Mr. Speaker, zero debt. I wish him and his wife, Janet, the very best in his retirement, and I want to thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
I would remind members that we are in 1-minute speeches, and for the sake of our gentlemen and gentlewomen, you move your conversation off the floor. With that, for what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
I should ask consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to support Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and declare this Congress a Republican do-nothing Congress of epic proportions. House Republicans continue to focus on chaos, dysfunction, and extremism. They continue to put politics over personal profit over the needs of the American people. Democrats help Americans. Thanks to President Biden's leadership, wages and the stock market are up. Inflation and gas prices are down. Turn the page. And in the last 4 years, the Biden administration has created 14 million new jobs and supported a record-setting number of American businesses. House Democrats want to work with Republicans to solve issues such as protecting our border and Social Security. We are ready to get to work with our colleagues across the aisle. Hopefully, we can build something together. And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Greater Du Bois Chamber of Commerce held its annual Business Bash Saturday evening, where outstanding organizations and individuals were recognized. The 2023 Small Business of the Year Award was presented to Penn Central Door, the premier provider of exceptional garage door solutions in the Du Bois, Pennsylvania area and beyond. The 2023 Community Cup Award was presented to the Du Bois Central Catholic School, Du Bois Central Catholic. Since DCC has emerged as a leader in academic excellence and character formation. The 2023 Du Bois Area JC's Distinguished Service Award was presented to Libby Gray. Known for more than 50 years of service to the Du Bois area, Mrs. Gray has served on the board and as president of many groups, including the Du Bois Regional Medical Center, YMCA, United Way, Public Broadcasting, the American Red Cross, the Catholic Social Services, and the Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Erie. Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to offer my congratulations and thanks to all those recognized for their impactful contribution to the Du Bois area community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I love this country, as so many here do. I remain as committed to it today as I was when I entered the Naval Academy as a 17-year-old. Through my voting rights, election security, and cybersecurity work at Pitt Cyber and the Brennan Center, I know, like others, that the threats to this beautiful and fragile democracy of ours are serious. In this very chamber on January 6th, insurrectionists attacked the people's government, spurred on by lies and conspiracy. Every patriotic American understands that government of, by, and for the people is a lot stronger than the guns and threats of extremists. With anti-democratic forces on the rise, Congress needs an all-hands-on-deck approach to protecting our Constitution. That's why today I launched my Defend Democracy agenda, a three-part policy roadmap to strengthen American democracy. Public trust is central, so my agenda starts with a critical slate of policies to try and earn back that trust. I hope all with a love of country will join me in supporting these anti-corruption, transparency, and reform measures for Congress and for political campaigns. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share the story of Atan Levy. Atan Levy was a cab driver from Bet Yam. On October the 7th, 2023, Atan called his son to let him know that he would be dropping off a passenger, and 15 minutes later called back again to tell his son about the Hamas attack. Atan's son heard him shouting and was told that a drone had landed on his father's car. His son stayed on the phone with his father until terrorists kidnapped him. Atan was not heard from again. In December, his family was notified that Atan had been murdered by Hamas. His body is still being held by Hamas in Gaza to this day. I stand here today to demand that Hamas release the body of Atan, that it be released immediately to his family, as well as to release all remaining hostages. We must stand with Israel as it works to destroy Hamas and free its citizens wrongly held by the terrorist group. It's time to bring Atan's body home. It's time to bring them all home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Ooh, okay. Oh. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Brigadier General Dan Gabrielli, who retires after 35 years with the Minnesota National Guard and the United States Air Force. Under his leadership, the Minnesota Guard addressed complex challenges, including overseeing 59,000 COVID vaccines and massive domestic airlift during Operation Capital Response in 2021. I first met General Gabrielli as the 133rd Airlift Wing Commander, where his impact on shaping airmen to serve with dignity was unmistakable. His leadership led to frequent and high recognition for the 133rd. In 2022, I witnessed his exemplary command at Task Force Hollow Man during Operation Allies Welcome, successfully resettling over 7,000 Afghans. His commitment extends beyond his official office as he continues to advocate for Afghan refugees in his personal capacity. Mr. Speaker, Brigadier General Gabrielli epitomizes selfless service and excellence. It is my greatest privilege to honor and thank Brigadier General Dan Gabrielli for his distinguished career and celebrate his well-deserved retirement. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Dr. Jack Murphy, who passed away at the age of 74. While attending Mercer University, Jack was introduced to Mrs. Peggy Jewel Womack, and they married in 1959. The couple remained in the area to allow Jack to begin his surgical residency at Macon Hospital. After starting a family of 3 children, Dr. Murphy worked as a surgeon at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah. He also worked as a first-team physician for local K-12 schools in Savannah, hoping to encourage kids to remain in sports and away from drugs and violence. Dr. Murphy also served as the chairman of the St. Joseph Candler Central Credential Committee and the Health Systems Board of Directors. Nurses who noted Dr. Murphy's energetic and personable character gave him the nickname Happy Jack. In 2006, the Georgia Medical Society honored Dr. Murphy's contributions with the Healthcare Heroes Award. Dr. Murphy will be remembered for his commitment to his family, his friends, and his community. His legacy of serving others will live on forever. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to recognize and congratulate the Program Inc., a mentorship program in our 9th District of Ohio that exists to provide an opportunity for young boys to develop their social and life skills. The program leads them to learn and deal effectively with the demands of everyday life. The organization's Tie event paints a vivid picture of young boys finding guidance and inspiration in the absence of father figures. Trayman Rayford, the CEO and founder, is committed to being that crucial figure for other young men. The Tie event started with the simple act of teaching young boys how to tie a tie. As Mr. Rayford reflects on what young men need, he emphasizes attributes of respect. Each boy receives a tie and learns to tie it. The young men are guided by 18-year-old Mr. Kier King, whose 5-year journey with the organization transformed not just his skills, but his self-respect and confidence. In essence, the Program Inc.'s commitment to mentorship transcends the practicality of tying a tie. It becomes a narrative of personal growth, self-confidence, and achieves the profound impact of positive mentorship on young lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor and remember Officer Daniel P. Dodato, a dedicated servant to the town of East Fishkill for 19 years. Tragically taken from us on December 18th, Officer Dodato's legacy is one of unwavering commitment, camaraderie, and a passion for life that touched all who knew him. Starting his career at the New York City Department of Environmental Protection in 2001 and joining the East Fishkill Police Department in 2005, Dan was a beacon of joy and strength in the East Fishkill community and amongst his fellow officers. Known for his quick wit, love of Marvel Comics, and an aficionado of pizza and other Italian cuisine, Dan connected with colleagues and friends through his humor, vast knowledge, and generous spirit. Colleagues recall his spot-on impressions, music recommendations, and heartfelt conversations. His presence brightened even the toughest days, leaving a lasting impression on everyone, from seasoned officers to newcomers. By honoring Officer Dodato here on the House floor, we celebrate a life of service, laughter, and a profound impact. Dan was more than an officer. He was a beloved friend, a cherished community member, a beloved brother, and a true hero. Thank you, Officer Daniel P. Dodato, for your service, your friendship, and the many lives you touched. You will never be forgotten, and may God bless your family. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to mourn the heavy loss of Matthew Peter, a friend to all and a rising star in our community, whose light was cut short far too soon. As a former Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Albany, an Albany County legislator, and Executive Director of the Albany Parking Authority, Matt was a public servant in the truest sense of the word. His passion and love for his community shone through in everything he did, and he had the determination and the know-how to get things done to improve people's lives. He accomplished so much during his years as a legislator, from helping modernize the parking authority to championing policies that provide mental health and substance use treatment. While his impact will continue to resonate with all across Albany City and County, Matt will be best remembered for his kindness, his intelligence, and immense spirit of service. My prayers and deepest condolences go out to his fiancée, Corinne, his parents, Bill and Nancy, siblings, Brian and Sarah, and all of his many family and loved ones. Rest in peace, my dear friend. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, President Biden's decision to completely stall LNG exports is a gut punch to the American economy, and it serves as a serious detriment to both energy security and national security. Has he forgotten that just last year our country led the entire world in LNG exports? Think about the American jobs that have been sacrificed because of his decision as well. While President Biden decides to trudge down this irresponsible path, our nation's adversaries are salivating. This administration is so determined to attack and undercut American energy that it's willing to sacrifice our geopolitical footing to do so. Instead of caving to the demands of the far left, President Biden would do well to put American energy first. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
In order to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we're pretty good at attacking federal workers around here, but we're not very good at praising them. So I want to rise today to offer my profound appreciation for the hardworking employees at the National Personnel Records Center, who last week completed a huge achievement. They eliminated a large pandemic-related backlog of veteran records requests. This is important to me, so I've been monitoring the situation closely. Veterans and their families rely on these records in order to access all the benefits that they've earned, as well as critical services, including housing and health care. Due to restrictions in place to protect worker health and safety during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Personnel Records Center amassed a gigantic backlog of tens of thousands of unfilled veteran record requests. Last Congress, as a consequence of bipartisan oversight and urging by leaders in the House, employees at the National Archives came to implement several critical new steps in order to address this backlog, including enhanced and reorganized staffing levels, technology updates, and digitizing millions of paper records. We owe great thanks to the employees of the National Personnel Records Center for a job well done, for their great commitment, their passionate hard work, and their unswerving devotion to eliminate this backlog for America's veterans. It was a true success story of federal workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise and request unanimous consent to address the House and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to advocate for our military men and women and their families and the work that needs to be done to improve their quality of life. As a former Navy helicopter pilot, Navy spouse, and now Navy mom, taking care of our military members is one of my top priorities. We can do better for our military, and there is much work to do. 2 weeks ago, I attended the funeral of Navy Commander Doug Morea, a Naval Academy graduate. Doug was an F-18 pilot who led a squadron during a recent 9.5-month deployment aboard the USS Truman. He died by suicide, and his death was one of 7 naval aviator suicides since July of last year. As I stood in the parking lot talking to base leadership after the funeral, I asked why. Why do we continue to see so many military suicides and the number rise? The base commanding officer spoke about the pressure even senior officers feel to care for their people, including the most junior sailor. Our country continues to ask our military, and specifically our Navy, to do missions around the world to keep the peace and defend the freedoms we hold dear. In order for our military men and women to complete this mission, we must provide the resources they need to do their job. That begins with ensuring they have the quality of life they deserve. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the wildfire situation in the West...
The gentleman will suspend. Does the gentleman seek unanimous consent to address the House? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Okay. It's a new week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the issue with wildfire in the West has been very devastating for several years now, many, many years, but incredibly large fires in the last 5 to 7, 10 years or so. And so we've needed more and more help from FEMA post-fire. And so what we're working on is bipartisan legislation. It's going to be called H.R. 7070 that will direct FEMA to update its regulations for the Fire Management Assistance Grant, public assistance, and mitigation. This will help after fire to respond to unique challenges of wildfires and improve wildfire mitigation. What I'm saying is debris removal, emergency protective measures, and impacts to drinking water sources. So it will help improve FEMA's cost-benefit analysis for wildfire projects to help them be more competitive for federal funding. We find this is extremely important in the communities that are devastated after fire, and it's still fairly new territory for FEMA when we're talking the size of and scope of fires we've had in the recent years, jumping from 4- and 5-digit sized fires to six digits, hundreds of thousands, even 1 million acres, like in the Dixie Fire in my district a couple years ago. So this legislation will give FEMA more flexibility and better serve the people. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker, I give much respect to this book called The Constitution, which if we read some of the opening comments made, it is said that the Declaration of Independence was the promise and the Constitution was the fulfillment. It's a good roadmap and the good truth. And so it disturbs me that the governor of the state of Texas is standing up against the supremacy of the United States and the Constitution. Amendment 10 says The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it are reserved to the states, respectively. It is the responsibility of the United States government to deal with immigration issues, and therefore the Texas National Guard should not be militarized to stand up against the Border Patrol agents. Federal agents in the service of their nation should be allowed to do their job, and that is to secure the border, and they have been doing that. Pass legislation that this Congress must do to give further authority to the President of the United States, and those Border Patrol agents will follow the law. We need to ensure that the law is followed by the states and the governors, and the law that the President upholds is a law that is supreme. Follow the United States of America and that law. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the United States House of Representatives do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow for morning hour debate.